Greater Than 0% is a 501c3 nonprofit that's on a mission to share stories of organizations from around the world that are changing lives. We have weekly episodes featuring amazing nonprofits and monthly episodes interviewing top business executives. You can find us at gtzp.org on your preferred streaming or social media platforms.
Everybody for tuning to this episode. Today we have Michael Smith, who's the CEO of AmeriCorps. Michael, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Joseph. Great to be here.
All right. So per usual, we like to start our interviews with missions and mission statements. So what is the mission of AmeriCorps?
You know, AmeriCorps has a simple but profound mission. How do we transform lives and strengthen communities through the power of service and civic engagement? And we've been betting on that power of service for the past 30 years.
All right. We'll get into the details of that. But before we do, why you? Why AmeriCorps for Michael?
Oh, my goodness. You know, AmeriCorps at its essence is figuring out how do we tap into people who want to give more, who want to give back, who want to do more. The types of people in the times of challenge and adversity who run towards the problem, not run away from it. You know, during the pandemic, AmeriCorps never closed our doors. We touched 12.5 million lives. There were people who said, sign me up. I will go in. I will knock on doors. I will run testing and vaccination lines. I will work in food banks. And so when I think about the work that we do to empower and enable those sorts of folks, I think about my own background. I grew up in Western Massachusetts in a household where my parents were both 16 years old when I was born. Single mom. We didn't have a whole lot, but we had a community that just gave so much. I remember years ago, a politician said something along the lines of, poor people don't see people working in their community. And I was like, well, that's not my experience. Let me tell you about my grandmother who worked 2 jobs. Let me tell you about the people at my Boys and Girls Club who were making probably $8, $9, $10 an hour at that time that were giving their all. And so from a very early age, I saw these people who didn't have a whole lot, but who gave so much. And so I committed from an early age that I wanted my career to be about helping those people, about building capacity and supporting communities like mine. And so, you know, I still have this pinch myself moment that I get to lead this agency that does so much to strengthen this sector of people who deeply care and believe in that idea that my neighbor's child is my child.
Yeah. Awesome. And I see you've been at AmeriCorps for 2 years now. Before that, Boys and Girls Club. And before that, I think there are also some other youth-related organizations that you served as a part of the board or the executive director or other various roles. What is what kind of caused the shift? I feel like you were very youth-focused, and now AmeriCorps is a very large entity, right? So I'm curious as to what happened to cause that shift, and what are some of the learnings you've taken from those previous roles into your current one?
Yeah, you know, I've been for the past several years in this middle ground between policy and community development. So actually, before coming to AmeriCorps, I worked for President Obama for about 7 years. I was a part of the team that designed and launched his My Brother's Keeper initiative that was building pathways to opportunity for boys and young men of color and making sure all young people could reach their full potential. Yeah. I led that work inside of the Obama White House and then at the Obama Foundation. And there, that was about working with mayors, working with governors, working with the private sector to figure out what can we do to really look at systemic challenges that our communities face. And here, the work that AmeriCorps does is probably a little bit more direct service. And I think what you see in my career is this real belief that you have to do both, right? You need people that are helping the hungry and the homelessness, that are handing out jackets when it's cold, that are giving soup to the hungry. But you also need people that are figuring out, why do we have so many people that are hungry? Why do we have so many people that aren't housed? What are the systemic problems that allowed that to happen? And how do we fix and repair them? We can't put our head in the sand and act like the problem doesn't exist. So thank God for those organizations who come and wrap their arms around people who need it now, but also thank God for those people that are trying to make sure we never have to do that work again, or we don't have to do that work 100 years from now, that problem begins to get eradicated.
Yeah, you brought up a really interesting point, and we've had the opportunity to interview a lot of executive directors over the past 3 years, and I feel like that is kind of a common battle that they've faced even in the inception of their organizations and throughout is my skill set, and I only have so much time in the day. How do I separate and combine and be active in both policy and both still within the community. So how has that battle in your brain developed and evolved over the past 10, 20 years of, like, should I invest 20% of my time in policy now and 80% in community, and 80% in policy now and 20% in community?
Well, in my career, I've had the privilege of going back and forth. It's probably been a little bit more on the policy side, but right now, AmeriCorps, the vast majority of AmeriCorps members are meeting real-time urgent needs, whether that's disaster, education, or hunger and homelessness, real-time needs. But AmeriCorps, we also are responsible for the president's call to service. We actively sit in various interagency policy councils. We're working with colleagues at the Department of Justice and Department of Education on juvenile justice issues. We work on gun reform issues. We work on climate policy. So while we are doing the work every day to meet direct needs, we're bringing our heft, we're bringing the voices of our AmeriCorps members, the communities that we work with, to help shape policy that we also believe will change the game.
Yeah. Okay. That's also a good call out. Federal agency, let's get a little 101. What does that mean?
So there are many federal agencies. So many people probably think about the Department of Education, the Treasury, the Department of Defense, et cetera, right? Those are all cabinet agencies. Right. And that's the highest set of agencies that sit around the president's cabinet. Then there are a bunch of agencies that either sit below cabinet agencies, like you have the Administration for Children, Youth, and Families, which sits within HHS. Then you have independent agencies like ours. FEMA, for instance, is an independent agency. NASA is an independent agency. And AmeriCorps 30 years ago was created as an independent agency. I report directly to the president and appointed by the president because we see this issue as being integral to the American democracy and also responding to our nation's most challenging issues that we're facing on the national level and on the local level. So we are funded by the taxpayers of the United States. We are a government corporation, which means we also do a lot of work in public-private partnerships. So every one taxpayer dollar we spent, we see $17 returned because we're actively looking at how can we partner on the state and the local level and also with private sector and philanthropy.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for that explanation. It makes a lot of sense. So of the 130 organizations we've interviewed, it sounds like you guys also have a very big grant program. So you partner with other organizations, nonprofits, 501c3s, whoever, that after some sort of evaluation, you've realized that they're deep enough in the community, they understand what are the main concerns, they have long-term and they have a model that's long-term. What are some of those partnership examples? Maybe for youth is an example. Boys and Girls Club, we've interviewed them before, just this Chicago location. We've interviewed a lot of other organizations here in Chicago that are working with juveniles as well. So using kind of that as an example, kind of youth organizations that are supporting underrepresented communities in Chicago. How would an AmeriCorps partner with those, for example?
That's a great example. So you're right. At the core of AmeriCorps, we are a government grant maker. We invest about $1 billion per year that supports around 200,000 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps senior volunteers that are serving in 40,000 locations across the country. So chances are, if there are people of goodwill doing something to address a local challenge, AmeriCorps members are in the mix. So some of those organizations that you just mentioned, Boys and Girls Clubs, Habitat for Humanity, AmeriCorps is actually a major human capital solution for them. So for instance, in Chicago, we have AmeriCorps members that work in Boys and Girls Clubs to do tutoring and mentoring and coaching for kids when they get out of school. We have AmeriCorps members that are teaching STEM and after-school programs. We have AmeriCorps members that are doing public health. You switch to something like Habitat for Humanity. We have AmeriCorps members that are helping to build or complete builds of houses. Actually, education is our largest space. We have about 40,000 AmeriCorps members that are serving in 10,000 K through 12 settings across the country. AmeriCorps members, including our AmeriCorps seniors that are in our foster grandparents. Those foster grandparents, for instance, are low income, mostly women that are working in a classroom, providing specialized support to a student that might need a little help. We don't have enough teachers, 600,000 fewer teachers now than the beginning of the pandemic. AmeriCorps members are a solution that teachers are working with so that they can spread their time a little bit more. So not only helping students, but helping the teachers. And so if you can find that extra need, Teach for America, for instance, that's an America. Teach for America is an AmeriCorps grantee. So all Teach for America members are AmeriCorps members, and we provide them all with education awards and training, and they're a part of our broader system. So chances are, if you see a lot of these big name organizations, and quite frankly, a lot of small local efforts too, AmeriCorps members are a part of that operation. And what's great is we're a human capital solution for that entry level, that extra help that they need. And then we become a human capital solution because we become a talent pipeline. And a lot of those organizations, 80% of our grantees end up hiring our AmeriCorps members, which we think is phenomenal.
Yeah, that was going to be the follow-up question is if somebody would want to just work directly with a Habitat versus an AmeriCorps path, that you guys are able to provide that talent as a resource. Okay, yeah. Wow.
If you think about it, so, President Clinton founded AmeriCorps. We actually have an event coming up with him in Little Rock this month where we're going to be celebrating 30 years. And if you go back and you listen to him and folks that were around at that time talking about why AmeriCorps, it's the simple idea that we'll never have enough tax dollars, right, to provide the human capital solutions to solve every challenge that our communities are facing. But what we do have in America is this unlimited interest from Americans to want to give back. And we've seen this. We saw this after 9/11. We saw this after Hurricane Katrina. We saw this during the pandemic. People are saying, throw me in, put me in, what can I do? People who may be willing to make a little less, people who may be willing to take a step out, people that are getting ready to retire who say, I'm not quite ready to retire yet. And so if we can provide you with enough money to live, enough money to eat, if we can incentivize you with an education award, so after your service, you can go back to school and better yourself and your family, then we can begin to provide that human capital pipeline that our communities so desperately need.
Yeah. Well, at an individual level, I'm sure you've ran into so many different people in so many different walks of life. How have you seen, maybe what are some of the characteristics of people that no matter how affluent or not affluent, no matter where they come from, impacts whether or not they choose to give back, right? So you gave the example of your hometown, and how would that compare to somebody who is maybe born into a more different affluent level neighborhood, and in terms of impacting their need and drive to want to give back? So what are some of those key characteristics that people have that really drive them to want to give back no matter where they're at in life that you've experienced?
What I'm excited about is you see giving across all socioeconomic backgrounds. Obviously, you see some time in life things that change, right? So when I am, starting my family, I might not be able to give as much as I could. But we do then find when you might have a 5, 6, 7-year-old who's in school, you start to give more. I might be in the middle of my career. It's a little harder. So I might give a few or less hours. But then as I'm getting older, I might give a few more hours. So you see those sorts of things that are time in life. The biggest thing we find why people serve is because they were asked, and there's someone that asked them. And it is important that they have a good first experience. I worked for Steve Case, who founded AOL, and for those young listeners, that's America Online. Google it. And I remember we were doing some project with Steve, and he said, people are always asking me to come and do this, making a sandwich. Maybe they should ask me about their business plan. Maybe they should ask me about how they think about technology. How do I put my skills and my talents to the best use? So one, we need to make sure that we ask people and that we find multiple ways to ask, and we need to find ways to put their talent to use, which is why AmeriCorps really is this Swiss Army knife. And if there's an issue that you care about, chances are there's an AmeriCorps effort that can meet your need.
Yeah. Well, at the CEO level, how do you manage all of the different types of engagements that you could have, whether it's climate, whether it's local, whether it's education? There's so many buckets that AmeriCorps has, their hands in. How do you make decisions when you guys are spread across so many different aspects, just about probably every type of nonprofit or organization or challenge that we're facing here locally?
Yeah, three things I think about. One, I'm sure any leader that you talk to would say hire people that are smarter than you. Surround yourself with an extraordinary, dynamic team, people that are proximate, people that know the issue, people that are passionate about this work. And so I have an incredible team in my office and who are actually in communities across the country that help us to think about our goal setting and also to make those decisions. The other thing that is really important to us is we're not making all the decisions in Washington, D.C. AmeriCorps was set up with a state commission model. So every single state, Guam, Puerto Rico, D.C., they actually have their own state commission where a governor appoints a group of commissioners. They hire an executive director. About a third of our dollars goes directly to them, and Nebraska gets to decide what works for Nebraska. DC gets to decide what works for DC. Guam gets to decide what works for Guam. And so, we have some guidelines, how you can spend the money. You can't fraud the government, those sorts of things, what makes for a good experience. But the states are really driving the deep local investment. And then the other thing that's really important to us is making sure that we aren't just, throwing pasta on the wall and seeing what sticks. We are rooted in evidence. We look at evidence-based models. We look at investing in what works. So right now, for instance, about 70% of our grantees have strong or moderate levels of evidence that are third-party tested. So we know that when we're investing in that organization is going to have an impact. That doesn't mean all of those organizations, have someone with a doctorate on staff that's running a double-blind randomized control trial. That could mean that they're on the evidence pipeline. And at the very least, they are using a model that has scientific evidence of working. So those three things are what we really look at to make sure we're making the best decisions. But I think part of AmeriCorps' model is that we can be flexible year over year. When the child tax credit came out, many AmeriCorps members went to start helping make sure that folks could enroll in the child tax credit. When the pandemic happened, AmeriCorps members helped to run testing and vaccination lines. As we're looking at the great challenges we're facing in the climate, President Biden recently launched American Climate Corps to build off of the 15,000 AmeriCorps members that are already working in the climate space to go even further in partnership with other agencies. So I do think it is important to stay nimble, but also have those broad guidelines to make sure that we're focused on impact.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure this is a question you get asked a lot too. How does, I guess, the president, whoever the president is, the party they represent, how does that impact you guys' normal operations?
All federal agencies go through this. It is the framers of the Constitution and their wisdom designed a system where the president of the United States, elected by the majority of the people, comes in with that agenda. And that president, he or she in turn, get to appoint the people that are leading federal agencies, who in turn get to appoint people that are working with them. And so I'm a political appointee. I'm appointed by President Joe Biden. As long as President Biden is here, I am here. But when he leaves, I leave. And so we carry the president's agenda. And so that's why we've been so focused on equity. That's why we've been so focused on climate. That's why we've been so focused on, going to the areas where there is the greatest need. I just got back from Alaska with our tribal communities and our rural communities. And that is us making sure that we move the agenda that the American people entrusted President Biden with.
Awesome. Climate, obviously a hot topic nowadays. What are some of the areas, and I ask this because we've interviewed some climate organizations recently, what are some areas that are part of the agenda that AmeriCorps is pushing forward with those 15,000 that you mentioned?
So AmeriCorps has been a part of this discussion around climate change and conservation and coastal erosion since our origins, actually before our origins. When AmeriCorps was created, a couple different things happened. One, it created a whole new pool of funding for the Teach for Americas, the City Years, the Public Allies, the Art Corps, the Food Corps, to create this new pool of AmeriCorps members that were going to make a difference in the nation. But the other thing it did was it consolidated some national service efforts that were already happening in the country. So, for instance, there was the National Civilian Community Corps, which was the legacy of President Roosevelt's CCC. And so for many years, we've had AmeriCorps members serving in the California Climate Corps. We've had AmeriCorps members in the Student Conservation Corps. And so those folks have been doing the work that is so important. Within the Biden administration, we realized that we need to do even more. So we're now locking arms with 4 other federal agencies. We're combining funds, we're combining branding, we're combining outreach to really move forward with this new American Climate Corps that's going to call a new generation of Americans, mostly young people and Americans of all ages, who want to do something to really address this existential threat that we are facing as a nation. And in doing so, I think we're going to make a real difference for people and planet, but we're also going to really change the game for green jobs in this country. And all of these American Climate Corps members will get the tools that they need to make sure that they're getting the green jobs of the future.
No. Do you have an area of AmeriCorps that is dear to you based on your experience, your specific passions, or is it really hard to have to put your eggs in that basket and have like a specific area that you're passionate about?
I can't pick favorites. What really draws me in is this idea of folks that really do give up a lot to give back. I told you I just came back from Alaska. The people that literally move from Florida to Alaska in a place that doesn't have internet connectivity all the time in one of the rural, more remote areas. Someone that could have been making 6 figures in a job, and who said, you know what, I'm going to make $11, $12, $13 an hour right now to do this work because I care so deeply. And so we've got AmeriCorps members that are working on all sorts of issues, direct service. We've got AmeriCorps members that are doing fundraising and strategic planning in our AmeriCorps Vista program. One of the areas of AmeriCorps that doesn't get a lot of attention, though, is our AmeriCorps Seniors. It's actually our largest group of people who give more time than most because they're retired. So AmeriCorps Seniors give 7 years in service. Wow. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've met an 80-year-old AmeriCorps Senior who's been serving for 20 years. Wow. And the work that they do, the clarity and the mission and the purpose that they have is worthy of celebration, because we so often think of that young person that's right out of high school or right out of college. But these seniors, the wisdom, the expertise that they're able to provide, the trust, they say, these kids tell us everything because we're grandma or grandpa in the classroom. I just have to love and lift up those folks who are continuing to serve into their later years.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to a comment you mentioned about the founder of AOL and the example you gave of their experience being like, use them for what they're good at and what their expertise is.
Yeah.
Because I want to liken that to an example that I've seen kind of constantly is giving back and people's ability to give back. And I've heard people fighting with this idea of, well, if I'm in the corporate world, for example, if I work harder at this current job, I'll be able to get to a higher level, which means I could be at a point where I am able to make more money. And at that point, maybe I'll be able to give more money versus spending my time and money now in saving it. So like that trade-off of like, should I give back time and money now, or should I wait till I'm in a better spot when I might have even more to give back if I had dedicated this time to that job instead of, so I kind of likened it to that AOL example because I think it's in the same vein, but I'd love to hear your perspective on conversations similar to that with people.
This is a question I get from young people all the time. This isn't just selfless, it's also selfish. I think about even my own background and the path that I have taken. That early volunteering and giving back experience that I got at my Boys and Girls Club, whether it was helping to run our local food program for seniors, whether it was coming in on the weekends to help with registration for the kids that were coming in for the basketball clinics, whether it was helping to put together summer camp sessions, that gave me skills and talents that put me above my peers. Because I was able to serve and learn all at the same time. And so our AmeriCorps members, they're finding a lot of interns at a company, might get the work where they're photocopying. I don't know if people still photocopy or doing those real entry level jobs. AmeriCorps members are given projects. They're designing things, they're leading things, and they're getting expertise and experience that catapults them ahead in their career. So when you think about, I'm going to wait, you're missing out on an opportunity to accelerate where you're trying to get by giving early.
Yeah. So it's just changing the mindset of what that commitment actually is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the perception is like you have to give so much and you're not going to get anything in return. And so it's a big commitment. And that's like one of the barriers of people wanting to at least even get started. But yeah, it's just a little bit at a time. And your example is perfect. Okay. The next generation of volunteers, how do we keep them engaged and get them engaged?
It's really interesting. We spend a lot of time thinking about this. We have a lot of Gen Zers on our staff that help us think about this. We do a lot of focus group. So I'm so excited. We actually end up hiring a lot of AmeriCorps alums at our agency. And there are a few different things that we think about. There was an article a few weeks back, I think it was in the Washington Post, about the military and the trouble that they're having with recruitment. This was actually after 9/11. And they're realizing that they're having to speak differently. A lot of folks that are joining the military today aren't doing it because they want to go fight the war on terror, right? That's not what they grew up on. They're not doing it because they want to go battle a foe somewhere. They're not even doing it to, raise a flag. They're doing it because they see local needs. They do it because they see benefits that they can get for themselves and their families, and this could change the game for them and their families. And so we're thinking a lot about that and the work that we're doing. So we actually talk a lot about this isn't just selfish. There are selfish things that you can get out of this. You can get money for your education.
Yeah.
You can get your loan forbeared, if that is the right word, when you're serving in AmeriCorps. You can get a living allowance. For some people, we tell them, you know what? You grew up in X community and you've been dying to see someplace else. We can help you get to that other place and try something new and have a different experience. And so we're spending a lot of time talking about what is that personal thing that you can get out of it. The days of saying, come serve your country, and you'll have millions of people wanting to sign up, it's not enough. We have to explain what's in it for them. This has been something that has been important from AmeriCorps from the very beginning, but we're honing in on it even more, making sure that we're relevant. So when I talk about being nimble, AmeriCorps members vote with their feet. Our grantees have to go out and recruit AmeriCorps members, and we're seeing more and more AmeriCorps members that want to serve in public health. We're seeing more and more AmeriCorps members that want to serve in environment and climate. And so we have to make sure that we are staying relevant and providing opportunities to meet the needs that folks see today, and also making sure that people have a good experience. If people come into AmeriCorps and all they're doing is standing on the side of the road picking up trash all year long, they're probably not coming back. And so we have to figure out how we're making a quality service experience for our members. Yeah.
That's a good transition. Future plans, 3, 5, 10 plus year plan. What do you hope AmeriCorps is in the future?
I think a lot about, for so much of AmeriCorps' history, we've been about how do you grow AmeriCorps? How are there more AmeriCorps members? And I hope that is true. I hope we continue to have more and more AmeriCorps members, but I'm thinking more about how do we grow the impact of AmeriCorps? How are we honing in on what our sweet spot is? I'll give you one example. One of our larger grantees, City Year, several years ago, they were doing a little bit of everything. They had community service projects, they had HIV/AIDS cores, they had projects they were doing with corporations, you name it, you go to a different city, they were doing different things. And then they saw in a couple of their cities where they were working directly in schools on absenteeism, behavior, and curriculum, they were seeing incredible test score results higher than what they were seeing with teachers in those schools. It was something about the near-peer relationship that those City Year AmeriCorps members had. There was something about the additive support that they were getting. And so they made a decision to scrap everything else that they were doing, all of those other lines of work, to focus specifically on this whole school, whole child model. And what we've seen is now, if you have City Year in your school, your test results are going to be better, your children are going to be happier, your teachers are going to be happier because they focused on results. And so in the future of AmeriCorps, I want to care less about how many places we're in, how many people we're serving. I want to be clear about the impact that we're having. The second thing that I want to see in the future of AmeriCorps is really centering the member experience. Some people think that it has to be a choice between community impact and member impact. I think we're only successful when we see both. When we were rolling out our new public health AmeriCorps program in Milwaukee about a year ago, I met a doctor who about 10 years ago wasn't sure if he wanted to go to medical school. His parents were pushing him into it. He didn't know. So he said, I'm going to go volunteer at this local health clinic through AmeriCorps Vista, just see what it's like. 10 years later, he was a doctor launching Public Health AmeriCorps in Milwaukee. So I want those sorts of transformative spirit. I mean, even in the Senate, Senator Heinrich, Senator Fetterman, Congresswoman Moore, those are all AmeriCorps members. And so I want to make sure that we are focusing on the impact of the member, thinking about the member experience so it leads to something that is transformational for them. And lastly, I want to focus on equity. Many people think AmeriCorps is that program for wealthy white kids who can afford to do a gap year. That's actually not true. We're actually more diverse than the nation in all of our ethnic categories. 40% of AmeriCorps members come from low-income families. But we want to focus even more on what are the barriers that exist that might keep some people from serving and make sure that we address those barriers so that AmeriCorps really reflects the rich diversity that we see in our communities and across the country.
Wow. Engagement. I'm sure there's a lot of listeners that are chomping at the bit to figure out how they could get involved. What type of engagement do you look for and how could they get engaged?
So what folks need to know is this can work all sorts of different ways, right?
Yeah.
So we've got our AmeriCorps programs that are serving in schools, community center, food banks, what have you, that are doing direct service work. We also have AmeriCorps Vista, which is doing poverty alleviation work and capacity building. So if you are scared about getting your hands dirty, there's an AmeriCorps slot where you can work in an office, in an air-conditioned office, and bring your sweater to work every day.
Yeah.
And you're doing incredibly work that's vital for organizations that struggle with marketing, communication, social media plans, et cetera. We have our AmeriCorps NCCC program. If you want to get together with 12 people you've never met before, given some training, keys to a 15-passenger van, and sent on deployments to respond to challenges, great and small, all across the country, see the country, you can join our AmeriCorps NCCC program. And then again, of course, for our AmeriCorps Seniors, for our folks over 55, we've got something for you as well. I think the other thing for people to realize is it's not all full-time. A lot of our AmeriCorps members are doing part-time, which is great. You might have a child and you're not sure how you can make a full-time commitment work. You might want to go to school more and not totally leave school to do this. And so there are lots of part-time AmeriCorps slots that you can do. We actually have some AmeriCorps slots that are as limited as 100 hours. So we can customize it. And we have a brand new Fit Finder tool on our website. I mentioned so many different examples. We've got folks working in solar. We've got folks working in housing. We've got folks working in the opioid epidemic. We've got folks working on nutrition and food. So I cannot imagine something that one of your listeners would care about that we don't have a way that they can serve in their community. And if we don't, you can find a nonprofit near you and have them go to AmeriCorps.gov to figure out how they can apply for one of our grants so that they could think about becoming an AmeriCorps program.
Wow. All right. Well, that's great. So people that are listening, start with the website. I mean, the match finder sounds right up the alley of if there's so many things to look into, that's where you could start. Anything you want to leave us with, Michael, before we wrap up?
I just want to say, at a time, this week especially, we're looking at Washington and, all the shenanigans that are happening here and people start questioning the American democracy. I feel like I have the best job in the federal government because every single day I really do get to see the best of America. I go to places where people say folks are really divided, and I see folks giving each other from different parties, different parts of the community, different races, literally giving them the shirts off their backs. And I still believe that this American spirit of service, of giving back, of helping one another still exists. We just have to tap into it. We have to cultivate it. We have to really believe in and be our better angels because that still exists. So I just have so much gratitude for the way that Americans show up for each other, the way that AmeriCorps shows up. For the past 30 years, every time America calls, AmeriCorps has answered, and we're going to continue to do that. And I hope your listeners will consider serving with us at AmeriCorps.gov. Think about becoming an AmeriCorps member, or think about how you can get some funding to do the work that matters in your community.
All right, Michael, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We covered a lot in 30 minutes, and there's a lot more we could cover, but thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for doing all of this work to lift up what is great and what is good about this country.
Thanks for listening to Greater Than 0%. To find more episodes or to have your organization featured on the podcast, you can find us at gtzp.org on your preferred streaming or social media platforms. Find your cause with Greater Than 0%.